And this video here, I'm going to talk about a basement renovation I did on my own house. I'm just going to do this because maybe it'll help some people, with their own basement renovations. I did a few things that would be, I guess, a little over and above what a normal basement renovation would have. I did that because my house is small; it's 960 square feet, and if I can make a very comfortable living space in the basement, I've just doubled my square footage because a lot of times basements get renovated and they're still cold and they're still dark and not comfortable, and then they just don't get used again. So if I was going to spend some money on renovating my basement, I wanted to make sure it was going to be a very nice place to spend time in. So as I mentioned, I did a few things which would be over and above a normal typical basement renovation. So I'll talk about what I did, and then I'll just talk about some of the things that I feel that I felt didn't work or could have been better end of the day. But and again, maybe this will help somebody out there that's thinking about renovating their basement. Maybe it'll help them make some decisions about things. So just to orientate you to this, I'll just zoom in on this. So 1950s house. Had a finished basement already, but it was quite old. I would say it was probably the basement, at least partially, was done probably in the 80s, was my guess. But anyways, nonetheless, you come down from the upstairs here, and then you come down to a landing where there's a back door kind of right here, and then you come down to the basement right here. And then, one large rec room on this side was kind of the idea. Some closet spaces there, and there. Storage room back in here, and two bedrooms, so one bedroom and two bedroom, and then there's a bathroom right here, and the washer and dryer was right here with some cabinetry across from it. And right in here, this closet here was the where the new furnace and a new on-demand water heater went. And so one of the things I wanted to do is again make this space quite bright. So the rec room here, there's actually three existing windows down here, so I did not change those. That worked out pretty well. We had lots of windows there. There was a very small window right here, so we enlarged that one and made it's quite large. There was no window here. There was an existing window here, which again is kind of small. And this is south facing on this side, so these windows on the south side are quite nice and getting, the sun's nice and low in the winter, and it actually the sun comes in quite far into the space down here, which is nice. But anyways, we added this window right here, and the size of the window was really driven by the building code. Basically, when you're going to have bedrooms in a basement, you have to have a certain size egress window, basically. So these were slider windows, so when you slide one side over, the opening has to be a certain size so that it's safe for egress out of that bedroom in the case of an emergency. So we added that window. There was no window there at all, so we put that one in. Again, it's quite large. And then over on this side right here, there was again a small window on this side, not big enough for egress requirements, so we put in a larger window there as well. So we cut out the foundation wall and just put in larger windows in three locations. So there, and there. So they're either brand new cut in or a bigger hole cut in and replacing a smaller window. And the rest of the windows were all existing. So that one we just kept as is. The bathroom one we kept as is. It already had some rain glass in it, so that worked out pretty good. And so here's that small window on the south side when you come down the stairs. So that's what was there before. And this is the new window that went in there. So the reason I wanted to bring this up here to show these pictures, because one thing you do want to be cautious of, and I didn't really actually think about it until after, but the footing is down here, right at the bottom of the foundation wall, and you want to make sure that when you cut that window in, like there's a window well, metal window well thing out here because the window goes below grade. You do want to make sure you get enough coverage still there of earth above the footing so you don't get any frost heaving happening. And I was okay. I ended up with just, I think, like 1.3 meters or something like that from the top of the footing, roughly, or I guess maybe the bottom of the footing to the sill of the window. It actually, I didn't think about it up front, but then I was like, ooh, gee, that was kind of lucky. But I still was a little bit nervous about it, and so I ended up putting down some insulation in at the bottom of the window well, and then putting gravel on top of that just to help protect it a little bit. And like I said, I didn't even think about that till after. It was actually we were in a cold snap one winter, and I was just like, oh geez, it was actually in this front window here. The water line comes in right beside that window. It comes in about right there. And I was thinking, oh my God, there's like now I've reduced how much coverage there is to that water line even right there. So I was getting quite nervous, and that's why I ended up pulling the gravel out of there and putting down some insulation. And it's been through quite a few really bad deep freezes, and I've never had issues. So with the water line or anything else. So I think I'm good. But anyways, that was kind of an interesting miss, I would say, on my part, not thinking about that. Had I thought about that beforehand, at least where the water line one was, I would have dug out the hole a bit bigger and put in some, had the contractor put in some insulation there. Okay, so that covers all I want to say about the windows. One key thing I want to talk about here is I'll just go to the yeah. Here's those windows there. So you can see like this is on the north side here, so it goes underground quite a bit in a couple of locations. I want to go to the wall section here in the basement because there's one other critical component to this basement that I had to deal with. Okay, so again, 1950s house, and you kind of have what you have. But anyways, here's the foundation wall right here, and here's the footing, and here's the slab on grade in the basement, basically. Now, I'm only guessing that that's what's there. I mean, that's pretty typical construction, so that's probably how it was done. So the problem I had, and it wasn't every day, I mean, it was a rare occurrence, but if we had heavy rains for, several days, it'd have to be for at least 2 days of quite heavy rain, what would start happening is water would start coming in the basement. And where it would come in is right here, okay, at the junction of the slab to the foundation wall. So, the ground would get to 100% saturation probably is what was happening, and hydrostatic pressure was pushing water up through the joint of the foundation wall. It didn't happen everywhere around the perimeter of the basement wall. It was more in some select locations where I could see it. And then when we demolished the basement, I could kind of tell that there was no water seepage elsewhere. But anyways, nonetheless, I wanted to deal with this. So what are my options with dealing with this seeping in the basement occasionally? Well, one option is you could put in a weeping tile system because back in the 50s they didn't have a weeping tile system. So you could put in a weeping tile system here, but that would mean you have to dig all this dirt out on the side of the house. Well, again, 1950s house, I've got a lot of plants growing along the side of the house. I got trees growing along the side of the house. I've got a brand new sidewalk. Well, not brand new, but I got a nice sidewalk, which would be very pricey to replace if I pulled that up. So, digging out this side of the outside of the foundation wall, to deal with a weeping tile system or a waterproof membrane, whatever, just wasn't an option in my mind to be doing that. It was off the table as far as I was concerned. So a second option I looked at is you can get internal weeping tile systems. Okay, so they'd break up the slab, from this point right here, and I guess they put a weeping tile system in there or something like that. I can't remember the exact details of it, but anyways, it can be done on the inside, which, I was demolishing the basement right down to the concrete, okay? So that when we demolished it, we took it right down to the concrete slab and right down to the concrete foundation wall. So it was feasible to do that, but the pricing for that came in at it was like $10,000 or $12,000, and I was like, well, okay, I have water come in occasionally. Like this isn't like this huge issue that happens all the time. It's very rare. So I wasn't prepared to spend $10,000 or $12,000 on this weeping tile system. So then I was like, okay, what else can I do? Well, how about I just let it come in? Okay, so what if I let it come in and not, and make sure it doesn't damage things? So let's just have non-organic things for this water to touch. And so the idea was that I was going to do some type of raised floor here, which would allow the water to seep in. Because again, when it happened, like the water wasn't deep. It's not like you're walking in ankle deep water. There's just some maybe a quarter inch of water on the floor or something like that. So I was like, well, what if I just let it seep in and give it a path to a drain? So there's a floor drain in the basement. So how about I just accommodate it and make sure when it comes in, it's not touching any wood products or gypsum board products and things like this. So that was the approach that I took. So where that led me was trying to figure out, okay, what type of flooring can I do here? Now you'll see in this picture here, so this is looking at the new rec room area. So here's those 3 existing windows right there, which brought in a lot of light into this room. Actually, it's quite nice. But what you see here is this is existing hardwood floor that was down here. It wasn't through the whole basement, but it was through some of it. So this hardwood floor was sitting on sleepers. So they were actually on, it was 2x4 sleepers, if I remember correctly. And then, the hardwood floor itself was another inch or so. So there was already a raised floor down here, and the ceiling height was pretty good. Okay, in the existing, like it wasn't an issue, at least, for the height of my family anyways. So I was like, well, that's good. That gives me, I don't have to worry now about if I'm going to add in um, a raised subfloor. I'm not going to make it so that it's super uncomfortable with the ceiling height. So I had the opportunity to do that. So then I started hunting around for some subfloor systems that would fit the bill. So one very common system is this dry core system. There's other products of similar type. And so basically what it is, it's an OSB board. And on the back side, it's got a plastic, I guess, film glued to it or whatever. And it is raised. Okay, so there's some bumps in it. There's another one where it's like a dimple basically on the back. And this would fit, this would work. So the idea is you could put this stuff down, and if water seeped in, it would just be seeping underneath this OSB floor. It wouldn't even touch the OSB floor, it'd just be moving around through the grooves of these raised parts of this panel. But my concern with this system was there's no insulation on it. And secondly, I wanted insulation because one thing I don't like is when people renovate their basements. They renovate, you get a nice flooring put in, and the floor is still freaking cold. I don't want that. So, this product, the idea is that, the whole point, I think, of having these grooves here is to get that air gap in there to create that insulation layer a little bit, but that wasn't good enough for me. And secondly, I didn't feel like the grooves were deep enough actually for the amount of water that I was going to be potentially taking in. I felt like the grooves just weren't going to cut it. So I said no to that. Then I started looking into, well, I want the insulation, and I knew that there was a product out there for getting a radon control system in where there's insulation basically. And so the idea of this is there's an EPS insulation here, and it's on pucks basically. So formed, this is all formed as monolithic item, but there's grooves in here for water to move through. I was like, this is perfect. I got my insulation, I got the grooves that water can move around in, and also I got my radon control mechanism as well in this existing floor. So this is a really good system. The issue I had, and I was just going to put this on top of the concrete slabs, not how it's shown here, because this is to be put underneath the slab, but I'd have to put it on top. And then can I attach or lay over OSB boards or whatever on top of it? I don't know. I didn't really get that far. Where this fell short for me was the thickness of this system. Okay, it was too much. So I didn't want to exceed the amount of thickness I had in the existing floor already because I didn't want to lose my headroom. So that was out as well. Didn't work for me. I was looking at KIP acoustic pads. So these are some, for acoustical flooring situations, they have these pads that are non-organic. So I was going to glue those or screw those to the bottom side of OSB board or plywood and use that as a subfloor. But again, it was lacking the insulation. So I kind of got rid of that idea as well. And this flooring issue, again, of wanting the insulation, not wanting too much thickness, wanting inorganic items so that water could move freely through it without molding things and that type of stuff. All these wants I wanted. I was having a hard time. Like it actually held up the project for a while, as I just couldn't find the right system until I came across this one right here. So this is available, widely available. I think we got it at Lowe's, but it's a so it's called Amdry Insulated Subfloor. So I went and looked at this. I guess this is just a blurry picture. I was waiting for it to clear up, but I must have just took a bad picture. But anyways, it's an OSB board, okay, on one side, and it's got an EPS insulation with a film on it too, actually. The gray is a film that was kind of on top of the insulation. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it had some grooves in there as well. And these grooves were actually a little bit deeper than those other boards that were available with the plastic on the bottom side. So and the overall thickness of this, I can't remember what it was, but it was not exceeding. By the time I put like an engineered hardwood floor finish on it, it was not exceeding what was there originally in the house. So the 2x4 plus a traditional hardwood floor. So this was perfect. It had everything I wanted. It had the drainage channels of adequate depth. It had the insulation, and it had the non-organic surface to allow water to move through it. So it was perfect. And so there it is. So I laid that down over the entire basement, basically. And then on top of that, we put an engineered hardwood floor. And what I will tell you is this was something that I would do over and over and over again. So we do have a hardwood floor in the basement, but it is a nice temperature. It never feels cold. You can lay on it and it's absolutely fine. So whether you have water seepage issues or not, I would highly recommend this product for your basement floor. And you'll see the poly in the background there. All we did was we just draped the poly basically underneath the insulation. Like it really just it's going to come down the wall, and it's just gonna. I'll go back to the detail, but it's just going to wrap underneath. In hindsight, I probably would have took a different approach to that, but nonetheless, I didn't want to caulk it to the floor or anything because I wanted to make sure if water came in, seeping in through that crack again, that it could find its way under this floor system to a floor drain. And so that's what we're seeing here. So this is representing the insulation part, that's representing the OSB on top of it, and this is the finished floor right there. So it was a engineered hardwood on there, which I can show pictures of later. So, and the idea was, again, the water is going to seep in here. Water is going to seep in here and just find its way underneath this thing to a floor drain. And it shouldn't, we actually pulled this off a little bit like that. It shouldn't ever touch the OSB product. You'll notice the base plate of the internal furring wall was put on top of this. And none of that stuff, the gypsum board is right here, the baseboard's right there. None of that stuff should be getting wet. And that was kind of the idea, just, allow that water to come in because it doesn't happen a lot. And fingers crossed, so far it's been a few years and I hadn't had any issues. So that's kind of the idea. So the flooring worked out perfect. I was quite happy with the result there. And again, it's quite comfortable. So that's something I would highly recommend. Something to think about though, in my situation, that hardwood floor that was in here wasn't actually at the bottom of the stairs. So this bottom of the stairs was just, it was actually a tile right here. It was a ceramic tile. So, because we laid down that product, I ended up replacing the whole stairs. Like I didn't want that final riser to be shorter than the other risers. That type of stuff drives me crazy. So I wanted to have equal risers all the way up to the landing. So I did replace that entire set of stairs just because of that subfloor going down right there. There we go. Here's a good picture of that situation right here. So there's the stairs back there. And so yeah, it was tile floor out here. And then this raised subfloor that was already there didn't extend out there. So that's why I had to replace the stairs. And so here's a shot with that Amdry subfloor going in. So the stairs have not been replaced yet. They just kicked it up basically and set it on top of the floor. But you can see it's kind of, probably could have left it, I suppose, but I ended up just replacing the stairs. So it was done nicely. Okay, so I was pretty satisfied with dealing with my water issues and dealing with having a nice, not warm floor. It's it's not obviously not a heated floor, but it's a normal temperature. Like you can walk in your bare feet. You don't feel like, ooh, it's cold. You don't get that chill through you. So highly recommend insulating your floor. Okay, so now the next thing you might notice here in this wall section is something right here. So typically in Calgary, what ends up happening here is we build a 2x4 wall that's insulated. Okay, insulated cavity of a 2x4 wall is the finished wall with gypsum board on it. And in Calgary anyways, and you don't have to do this, but this is generally how they're all built around here, all the basements, is there's an air gap left here. Okay, so you're just not putting the wood right against the concrete, because in a new build, there'd be some moisture coming out of the concrete. But if you ever had, I guess, if you ever did have some dampness going through the concrete, you wouldn't want it touching the wood. So there's always an air space left there. Is usually the way it's done. So I just decided, well, what's better than air? Well, insulation's better than air. If we're going to put air there, I might as well throw some insulation in there too. So certainly I would have been comfortable with a XPS insulation. So styrofoam insulation could be used there, and that 1.5 inches what you'd have there, or 1 inch, one of the two. I just personally, I'm trying to avoid as much styrofoam as possible in this building, mainly because it's not just mainly environmental things, but I just feel like every second counts in a house fire, and styrofoam products, one, they go up like crazy, they're super flammable, and then secondly, just the the smoke that they produce is super toxic. So I just wanted to avoid it. You know, would it be protected for a while because it's gypsum board and then you'd have an insulated stud wall? Yeah, yeah, it would. But nonetheless, I was trying to avoid it. So I ended up going with a Roxol, or it'd be Rockwool. No, Rockwool Comfort Board 80 is what I use there. So it's an inch and a half of mineral wool insulation. And I come from a commercial work background where mineral wool insulation is hands down used all the time. So for me, it wasn't an abnormal thing to be putting mineral wool insulation in there. And so here's a shot of that right here. So here's your concrete foundation wall. There's the inch and a half, so 38 mil of mineral wool insulation. And then the 2x4 studs we put on top of that. And again, that's all sitting on top of that Amdry subfloor. And so there's just a shot of the mineral wool insulation against this wall, and then the 2x4 studs going on there. And yes, then we did insulate in the stud space as well, and then put a vapor barrier on there. And this appears to be the only picture I have of that. So there's the stud, and we put a mineral wool insulation in the stud space, and then the poly on top of that. And there's that new window. Actually, this is one of the bedrooms, so that was an existing window there, and this is the new window there. So you can see the window well in the background there, and that's why I was getting worried about that clearance from the finished ground to the footing there. And so that was pretty straightforward doing that. And then if we move up to here, in this house here, the joists were actually embedded in the concrete, so they just embedded each joist right in the concrete. So there was a weird little gap kind of right here that we put spray foam insulation in it. Basically, it was kind of the only way to deal with that. So spray foamers came in and they spray foamed all around the perimeter. And you know, I ended up taking it out. It actually ended up being out here, roughly like that was the spray foam, which worked pretty good. I had called for a piece of the comfort board 80 to be fitted between the joists in front of the mineral or in front of the spray foam, and that again was just about fire. I just wanted to get some protection in front of that spray foam insulation because I'm just worried about the flammability of that stuff and how seconds count in a fire. So that's what that was all about right there. And the other part of it too, I mean, not related to the insulation in front of it, the mineral insulation is not flammable. But you know, we had to vacate our house. I can't remember what it was. It was at least 24 hours we had to vacate while this spray foam cured. That's not very cool with me, but you know, again, I didn't really have much options there. That was the best product for the task in that situation. But would I ever spray foam my entire basement? No, absolutely not. I'm not comfortable with the off-gassing of that stuff. I'm not comfortable with the flammability of that stuff. So this is why I took that approach mainly. Okay, so I upped the game on the Windows situation, I would say, from your standard renovation, which I'm going to say was absolutely worth it. There's no doubt about it. That window there, these are south facing. We get really nice sunlight in there. We put in this window over here. These three were already existing. So again, I was after a basement that we are actually going to use and it's going to be comfortable. So the windows were a big part of it. The flooring, insulated flooring was a big part of it. And you know, the walls, I guess, putting in the extra insulation, it certainly helps. But you know, when it comes to basements, you know, we have furnaces that are one zone basically put in houses typically. And what that means is your thermostat's on the main floor and you don't have a thermostat in the basement. And let's face it, that it's two different environments completely. Okay, one of the environments is 3/4 underground and one of the environments is completely above ground. So if you end up renovating your basement and you keep your thermostat on the main floor, your basement's still going to be uncomfortable. Like it's still not going to be where you want it. So one of the things that my furnace was getting quite old anyways. It was not on its last legs. I'm sure it would have had many years left, but it was old. And so we put in a new furnace and we put in a 2-zone furnace. And again, like if for any basement renovation out there, I would do a 2-zone furnace, do it. And what it means is that it's one furnace, but there's 2 sets of supply ducts and there's some dampers that work. And basically there's the 2 supply ducts are down in the ceiling space in here. And I think actually they're here. The 2 supply ducts are here and then the return duct. There's only one return duct. You could probably do 2, but there's only one. In my case, came in like that and the furnace was sitting here. So there's damper control, and there's a thermostat sitting on the wall in the basement right there. There's the normal thermostat upstairs, and you can set them at different temperatures, and the furnace can kick in and kick off for each space separately. It can run both spaces at the same time if it wants. So in the morning when it kicks in at say 6 a.m. or whatever, it's heating both spaces, but during the day or whatever, the basement zone will kick in a lot more than the upstairs zone, for example. And what I've found in about, I guess it's been 3 summers with this system, is I will take the thermostat down in the basement down to about 20 degrees in the summertime in the basement. So I don't want it to be too cool, but I take it down to 20, and that furnace will run the entire summer, regardless of what the temperature is outside. It'll still run. It doesn't like kick in all the time, not every day, but that zone in the basement will continue to run through the summer occasionally to keep that 20 degrees. And of course, upstairs, I just turn the thermostat off because there's no way I need it in the summertime upstairs. So the 2-zone furnace, I'll highly recommend that. And now, we can set the temperature in the basement to whatever the hell we want, based on its environment, and it'll be comfortable down here. And I can attest to that, that it is very comfortable. And it's actually set to a degree and a half higher than the main floor, actually, all the time, just to get that same comfort level in the basement. So when you're walking downstairs from the upstairs, there's none of that feeling of, oh, the temperature just changed, the humidity just changed. Like it feels like you're walking from one space to another, but it's the same temperature, and there's no adjustment to your body. You don't feel it at all. So what did that cost for the 2-zone furnace system? Like again, we gutted the whole basement, so doing the supply ducts, obviously, 2 supply ducts is a little bit more work, but it's not. We're not talking a major amount of work here. And the furnace, the mechanisms in the furnace itself, I think it was around $1,500 to $2,000 to have that extra feature on the furnace, because again, there's a computer panel and dampers and that type of stuff. So, but it wasn't a huge expense. So highly recommend doing the 2-zone if you're replacing your furnace as well. And so the other thing I did as well was added in a on-demand hot water tank, so a tankless system basically. It was really just more about less room basically required for it. So there's that system right there. No complaints about that at all. So again, it's been a few years, and yeah, we love it. So I wouldn't go back to a tanked system. One thing I would have done if I was thinking, okay, things that I should have done, I should have ran a new hose bib into the backyard from this heater, and I could have had warm and hot water from a tap in the back, which would have been fantastic. Something else I did here as well was there's an existing chimney here. So the old furnace was sitting, I can't remember exactly where it was. I think the water heater was here and the furnace was here or something like that. Anyways, and the vent went through that chimney. So I did keep the chimney because I didn't want to screw around with demolishing it in the basement and then having to deal with it on the main floor and on the roof and all that kind of stuff. So I kept it. And the idea was, I didn't actually do this right now, but I've kind of set the stage. I've roughed in for the ability to put in a gas fireplace. And my hope is that I can run the flue for that fireplace through the existing chimney. A couple other things we did that we're quite happy with is we didn't do built-in closets. We just used the IKEA pack systems. It actually saves space, and they're way more efficient for clothing. So the pack systems worked really well for us rather than closets. I actually think I'd recommend that to any house I was doing. I don't think I'd do any built-in closets. I just recommend the pack systems. And so just a couple of pictures from the finished space. So here it is here. So again, we put a engineered hardwood on top of that subfloor. And yeah, it turned out pretty good. Like I said, the flooring it's a nice temperature. We got lots of light in through here. So I pulled this wall back. Enough right there that light could get right through into that whole basement, and made sure we did a nice open railing there. So what would I have done differently with the vapor barrier? I would have ran that down the wall. If I was doing it again, I would have brought it along here, and I actually wouldn't have draped it under the way I did like that. Like it's not cocked to the floor because again, I want that water to be able to flow in when needed. But probably what I would have done is brought it. I think if I was doing it again, I would have brought it down and I would have caulked it to the concrete right there, probably is what I would do. I didn't put in a radon system. In hindsight, I did do the test. I did a radon test and there wasn't an issue. In hindsight, we did all that work. It wouldn't have hurt just to rough in a system, and I should have done that. But I didn't, so I'd recommend doing the radon system. If you're doing a full basement renovation, it's not complex. I mean, it's literally just a perforated pipe that goes under the slab with some gravel around it and then a pipe venting out. So it's quite easy to do. I just didn't feel the pressure to do it because, like I said, I had a radon test put in here and we never had any concerning readings. But if I think it's a good idea to do it for sure. So the radon thing would have been one thing I would do. In hindsight, if I go back in time, I would have had the contractor put insulation down where we put in the window wells. That would have been a good idea. It's been dealt with now anyways on my own, but obviously it's easier to get the contractor to do it. Again, I just didn't think about it. This mechanical room here, so again, like furnace, it just barely fit. So this mechanical closet that I put in here, what was driving it was there's an existing column there, and I was just trying to get enough. I was just trying to get the. I guess I could have shifted the whole closet. Anyways, it was tight. It fit. It was fine, but it was tight. So I definitely wouldn't go any smaller than what I show here. But there was room for the new furnace and humidifier, and then there was room for that on-demand water heater. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is I originally had to deal with the leakage around the building as well. I did put in a sump pit as well. So there was a sump pit. I intended originally to put it in this room right here. Ended up going underneath the stairs right here. So again, that's just going to help. That sump pit's going to help take the pressure off. When the water is building pressure up against the foundation wall. Having that sump pit just gives an easier path basically to drain into, and it'll take the pressure off. So I think the sump pit's been an important component. I've kept an eye on it in some pretty heavy rainfalls, and it works. It fills up with water and it just pumps it outside into the backyard. But certainly the sump pump was a must as well. Just trying to find where I noted that. Oh yes, sump pump over here. So yeah, the intent was there, but it didn't quite fit. There was still a lot going on there, so we ended up moving it under the stairs right there, which is great because actually the most leakage that was happening from the foundation wall was in this area. It was in this corner right here. There's a little bit along this wall, but by and large, most of it was here. And I couldn't see any evidence of, this was all raised floor before in here, so you never really knew. But there was no water damage or rot or mold or anything on the wood subfloor that was down. So I don't think there was any seeping in of water in any of this foundation over here. It seemed to be concentrated here and a little bit over here, maybe a little bit there. So putting the sump pump in this corner over here was a really good fit basically, and a good solution. And again, all it does is it just pumps the water outside into a pipe that sends it down this way. The grade goes that way, so it just pumps it out. But I would say it's a big part of reducing how much water might seep into that basement for sure. There's no doubt about it. What else didn't work for us? The two supply ducts were fine, except, and I can't remember exactly why, but usually it's an 8-inch deep duct. One of them ended up being a 10-inch deep, and I think it was because fitting the return air and two supply air ducts in this width basically was a problem. And so one of the ducts had to get a little bit deeper. So the ceiling in this corridor here was a little bit lower than I would have liked, but it's fine. I mean, we're not a very tall family, and it's okay. But if we had a little bit more room, we probably could have done two 8-inch deep supply ducts, and then we would have had 2 inches more headroom here. But again, it's fine. I just bring that up as, these are the types of kind of surprises that happen as you go. You can see right here, actually, that there's where that ceiling is right there. Like it's dropped quite a bit lower there. So 2 inches lower than I wanted it to be. Not the end of the world. Again, it's fine. But, I ended up arguing with the tin basher, the person doing all the duct work. I pushed him and I pushed him and I pushed him, and he was like, "No, man, no, you need to do this 10-inch duct." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I hear you. You're the expert on that." So I backed off. What else didn't work was, I would say, this stack washer and dryer. I would have made this so it looks like I had, including a 2x4 wall, 3 feet, 4.5, go a little bit wider. It's tight. It's pretty tight to get those in and out. There's not a lot of fluff room basically. They're in there. They're fine. I'm dreading the day that I got to replace them because it is a pain. And I think just making this a little bit wider, like even just like 2 or 3 inches wider, 4 maybe, would be ideal. Would have been much better. And it didn't really help either that this ceiling was a little 2 inches lower than I intended. That made it even tighter. They fit, but again, it was just kind of something that happened that we just had to work around. Something else I had abandoned. At one point I was planning to do a laneway house on this property, and I was gonna have them rough in the sanitary line just outside the building there, so that I could tie into it and run it to the laneway house someday. In hindsight, I ended up taking it out and saying, "Ah, don't worry about it." But in hindsight, I probably should have done it because I actually do think I might have interest in a laneway house again someday. But anyways, we'll just deal with that when the time comes. But something to consider, certainly, if if you think you might do a laneway house one day, maybe it's a good idea to extend your sanitary line. If you're going to be gutting your whole basement, and you might as well rip up that. I mean, the slab all got ripped up here for new plumbing anyways. They could have just done a trench and probably got it out. It was low enough that it was going to be below the footing, I believe, if I remember correctly. So would it make sense to do it then if you knew you were going to do a laneway house? Yeah, probably. Other than that, though, it turned out pretty good. So, really there was not a lot of things I would have changed too much. And again, I would like the comfort level in this basement is fantastic. Okay, so the floor was key, and the two-zone furnace was key. Those two elements are, in my opinion, not debatable. If you're renovating a basement, do the insulated floor and do the two-zone furnace. Oh yeah, and the third component that was absolutely key to making this a nice space was lots of windows. So the big window here, here, and here being added in was well worth it. And we were lucky that we had existing window there, there, and there. This really is a nice space now. So I wouldn't, I would certainly highly recommend again the subfloor, insulated subfloor, the two-zone furnace, and get some windows in there.